since we have less time, now I wanted to skip the break, 5-minute break, and I want to invite Dr. Ram Avatar to give his lectures on multi-sensor remote sensing techniques for forest biophysical parameter estimation. Dr. Ram Avatar is an associate professor at Hokkaido University, Japan. Ram, could you please share your slide, your screen in the Zoom, please? Yes, we can see your presentation. Please go ahead.
Okay, sure. I'm just looking for marker.
Yes, and you have 25 minutes for these presentations, and
Okay.
I will tell you when there is 5 minutes left.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Thappa, for giving me this opportunity to present about one of the interesting topic that we are looking into, like how we can use geospatial data, especially the multi-sensor remote sensing techniques for estimating biophysical parameters in the forest or plantation area. So my name is Ram Avatar. Currently, I'm working as associate professor at Hokkaido University, Japan, and I'm also serving as director of the Global Land Program Japan Nodal Office. So let me briefly talk about what I'm going to cover in this talk. So yeah, so this is the outline of my talk today. First, I was thinking maybe I have more than 30 minutes time to discuss about this topic. So maybe I will just try to cover 3 or 4 topics. So basically, I'm going to cover these 4 topics. First one is focusing on Cambodia, how we can use the multi-sensor remote sensing techniques for implementation of RED+ policies and as well as the community forestry programs in Cambodia. The second one is focusing on how we can use the knowledge from remote sensing for implementation of RED+ program in Philippines. Then third one is about Malaysia plantation monitoring. And then we have the fourth one is the Japan using the ERV data for tree species classification. And last one is the tropical forest peatland monitoring. So let's begin with the first one. Today, as we know, climate change has become a major issue in 21st century. And today it is widely accepted that climate change is going on, and we are the major cause of it. And because of the climate change that causes various kind of environmental, ecological, and socioeconomic problems on the Earth's surface. And we know, like according to the IPCC report, that clearly shows about 20% of the emissions coming from the deforestation and forest degradation. And in fact, to mitigate the climate change, the Kyoto Protocol was initiated, and later on the scientific community start working on the RED+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation program. And so basically, when we talk about this RED+ program, is also the United Nations endorsed mechanism to mitigate climate change. And in fact, the recent GEO5 reports that also clearly shows like there is a pressure on the land resources has increased during recent years, despite international goals to improve their management. And now we are talking about the sustainable development goals. And on one hand, we have the SDG, other hand, we have the GEO5 report as well as GEO6 report. And we also have this RED+ program by United Nations. So here I'm going to talk about how we can use the geospatial data for monitoring the biophysical parameters. So let's discuss about what is the importance of the forest biomass and how useful it is for implementing the UN RED+ program. So especially when we talk about the UN RED+ program, then estimation of the forest cover and forest biomass is very important for implementation of the MRV system, that stands for measurement, reporting, and verification. So as we know, we can easily monitor the forest cover using the satellite data, but still there are challenges related to forest biomass estimation, especially focusing on above ground biomass estimation. So if we talk about the above ground biomass estimation, there are various methods. First one is if we have the inventory, like forest inventory data, then we can easily monitor how much is what is the percentage or how much of the carbon storage is there in the particular forest. The second one is using the optical data. There are methods already developed by some scientists. We can use the optical remote sensing data to monitor the forest biomass. And then third one is the using the SAR sensor, especially Dr. Thapa is specialized in the SAR field, and we had organized various kinds of capacity development program in Southeast Asian region to use the how we can use the SAR data for monitoring the forest. The last one is the how we can use the LiDAR data for estimating the. So these are the main methods for biomass estimations. So however, there are some limitations of using these methods. Like if we talk about the accuracy, the cost, and then spatial resolution, and then we find like of course the forest inventory data can provide very precise forest biomass information, but it is not possible to cover the entire country using the forest inventory data. We can collect only in a few places or the selected places by doing them ground survey. So it's because it's very labor intensive, and if we don't have any historical record, then we cannot get any information. The second one is about the optical sensor, especially in tropics, because the main limitations is cloud, and there is also no penetration in the canopy because it can cover only the surface of the canopy. So we cannot get enough information. So that is another limitation of the use of optical data. In case of SAR, of course, it can provide us from medium to high resolution data set, and the accuracy is also good enough. But the main problems is we are still facing the saturation problem, especially in the high biomass region. The last one is the LiDAR sensor. Of course, it can provide us much more precise information because of the use of the 3D points cloud data. We can extract the whole structure, the tree height, the diameter, and all those information, and that is useful for biomass estimation. So this is the overall framework that we can use, especially when we talk about the multi-sensor remote sensing techniques using the geospatial data. So here I would like to show one of the case study that I worked on, especially focusing on the Cambodian region. So we basically worked on how we can estimate the biomass of Cambodia. So these are the data sets that I use. I use the ALOS Pulsar 50-meter mosaic data that is freely available from JAXA. And we have collected various kind of forest inventory data in the Cambodia by doing some field survey and by visiting the sites. And finally, I developed this is the methodology that we can use to estimate the forest biomass of the Cambodia. And here you can see this is the pulsar data with HH, HB, and HH by HB color composite, RGB color composite, and you can clearly see the forest area shows the green color, and this blue color shows the water, and this gray color shows the some kind of agricultural area. And in case of Cambodia, there are mainly three types of crop. First one is evergreen forest, mixed forest, and the deciduous forest. So I worked on, I collected the forest inventory data in Cambodia with my team, and I analyzed what is the relationship with this technique. So I found interesting results that I got. So the cross polarization of pulsar data clearly shows very high, good correlation as compared to the co-polarized data. So fine, and in fact, like the ratio of the HH by HB also shows a good result. So finally, I selected this HB as well as HH by HB to generate this multi-linear regression model. And finally, I applied this model to estimate the biomass of Cambodia. So here you can see this is the biomass map of Cambodia, and this shows the land use land cover of map of Cambodia. So if we compare all these two maps, as well as finally, I also did some validation in this area. So that clearly shows in case of evergreen forest or the mountainous areas, there is very high amount of forest biomass that is present. In case of deciduous or mixed forest, the biomass range is about 100 to 150 ton per hectare. And so I also validated this results with the existing study. And finally, I used this algorithms, the multi-linear regression model to upscale the biomass map. And finally, I produced this biomass map of Southeast Asian region. So that is one of the activities or research that I have been working on. The second one is about how we can use this spatial modeling techniques for estimating the future scenarios. Now we are talking about the SDGs and SDGs goal implementation. So it is quite important to know what is going to be the future of the forest. So if we are doing such kind of simulation and projecting about the features about the forest, that is going to be very useful for implementing certain policies, especially in case of Cambodia. So this is the work we have done with Dr. Thapa, and we have produced these future projections of Cambodian forest. that can help the local governments or the Cambodian governments to think about what kind of policies are needed, how we can implement those policies. So that is also one of the work that we conducted in Cambodia. And then also we also worked on this forest management, like how we can use the sustainably community forest management program in case of because Cambodian government is going to expand the community forestry programs in a larger scale. So it is very important to know whether the whatever existing community forestry projects are there, they are performing well or not. If some of the community forestry projects are not performing well, then what are the reasons behind? If some of the community forestry projects are performing very well, then what are the reasons behind? And we should learn from some lessons, and we should share some knowledge. What is the success of all those community forestry projects? Then only if we learn the good lessons, and in future if we are going to implement or upscale this community forestry program, then it is going to be very win-win action, because then maybe chances of the success of these community forestry projects is going to be high. So therefore, in this study, we are monitoring the effectiveness of community forestry programs by looking into the existing resources that is coming from the satellite data, by monitoring the forest cover, deforestation hotspot, as well as the forest biomass information that we can integrate with these community forestry program that is already existing. And we also have to do some kind of questionnaire survey to know what is the in reality is going on at the ground, because if we, until unless we are not talking with the local community people, it's quite difficult to get the information why these particular community forestry project is successful and why there is a failure. So therefore it is we need to have some kind of integrative approach or interdisciplinary approach, where we can not only just look into the satellite data, but we also need to look into the ground-based reality by doing some questionnaire survey, by involving some focus group discussion to know the field-based reality. And finally, we can analyze what is the effectiveness of the community forestry program, and that can help in the future about the to solve some of the challenges by the National Forest Program by Cambodian government. And finally, it can also contribute towards the SDG implementation, especially goal number 13 and 15, as well as the UN Red Plus program. So now next study is about the if you go Myong Forest Management Plan. So this is the one of the case study that I have worked with at United Nations University in Ifugao rice terraces. These are the World Heritage Sites in Philippines, and you can clearly see here, these are the rice terraces. You can see, and just above these rice terraces, you can clearly see there are huge the forest, dense forest is there. So of course, these local people, they are some of the part of this forest is managed by the local people, so they are utilizing the resources, as well as the some forest that is present abundant, like they are not managed by the forest. So we have looked into if, because the main problem that this if you go rice terrace is facing, because now the young generation, they are not interested in doing these agriculture practices, because they feel like if they move to the city area or the urban area, then they can get much more incentives, or they have the better life, so they are moving towards the urban areas. So to sustain such kind of very traditional knowledge, or to do such kind of traditional farming practice, it is very important the local people or the young generation should stay there. So we should give some incentives to those people, and to give those kind of incentives, then it's very important to look into what is the role of Red Plus activities in this area. So we started our discussion with the local people, the community people. We discussed about, we had various kind of forest the focus group discussion to tell them what is the Red Plus program, how it can help them to improve the livelihood, how they can apply for the carbon credits, how they can get the financial incentives. So all those things we discussed during this community forestry management program, especially by doing some kind of questionnaire survey. And later on, we also produced this uh, biomass map using the pulsar data as well as the ground data. So here you can see we have used the similar methodology that we use in case of Cambodia. And interestingly, what we have noticed, like in case of Myong, and they have two types of Myong, is the community-based managed forest, and Blid is the natural forest, like, and that is abundant forest that is present there. So what we have looked into, what is the carbon pool or total carbon in case of the Blid forest and Myong forest, what kind of what is the total amount of forest, and if they apply for some carbon credits, how much is the is the carbon credits or the incentives they might get. So those kind of studies we conducted in case of Ifuga or rice terraces in Philippines. And if you are interested to know more about these activities, then maybe we already published this paper, so you may go through it. And then let's move to the next one, is about some of the activities related to plantation. As we know, in case of Borneo, in Sarawak, and especially in Malaysia, there is lots of plantation is going on. So we are looking into how we can use the satellite data for sustainable plantation management. So here you can clearly see this satellite data shows what is the expansion of oil palm plantation in this area. So you can clearly see there is, if we look into the Landsat data 2000, then we can see like this whole, most of the area is covered by very pristine forest. But since 2001, they started kind of logging activities, and they converted this the natural forest to plantation, and they started the oil palm plantation in this area. So you can clearly see from 2001 to 2011, there is clear expansion of oil palm plantation area. But what problem we have noticed here, if we are using the Landsat data that is optical, then mostly it's cloudy data. So it's quite difficult to get this temporal trend of the expansion of oil palm plantation. And if we want to see more detail how this Landsat data looks like, so here you can see what is the signature. Of course, if we have certain optical data, then we can easily identify. So here you can see these are some of the sites that clearly shows this is the very recent oil palm plantation, and this is very old oil palm plantation, and this is still peatland forest that is present there. This is the image of 2005 that we can clearly see all these kind of land covers very clearly. And if we look into this Landsat 8 data of 2014, then we can clearly see there is a huge expansion of this oil palm plantation in this area. So we had conducted various field surveys, we collected lots of data, ground data, the yield data, then plant age data, many because we have some collaboration with the local company. And finally, I looked into how we can use the Landsat data, the Pulsar data to estimate the yield. Because what is interesting in case of oil palm plantation, if we want to monitor the yield of oil palm, then if we know the age information, then it is quite easy to estimate the yield at a rough scale. So in case of oil palm plantation, there is expansion of the crown size with the age. So you can clearly see the left hand side, at the age of 0 year, there is no crown, but when they start growing, there is also increase in the crown cover. From year 2 to 3 to 4 or 6, at around 7 years or 8 years, there is a full crown that is developed. So we can, then later on, I looked into how we can use the pulsar based backscattering information to estimate the age. So this is finally the map of the oil palm age map produced in this area. And finally, we use this one. And here I also looked into how we can use the multi-temporal pulsar data from 2007, 8, 9, and 17. Then you can clearly see there is expansion of this blue color. So finally, I produced this oil palm plantation map of using the pulsar data. And I also produced this oil palm plantation growth stages map that clearly shows what are the various growth stages, especially focusing on the old oil palm, the medium oil palm, and young oil palm in this area. And we are also working at a micro scale by monitoring not only the biophysical parameters using the satellite data, we are also integrating with the meteorological data, that is mainly the temperature and precipitation. We are also monitoring the soil edaphic factor that includes the soil moisture, soil texture, and soil pH. And we are integrating all these edaphic, the soil related information, then the climatic information, as well as the biophysical information that is coming from the satellite data. And finally, if we integrate all these information, then we can predict the oil palm yield in a much more better way. So that is one of the project or research that is going on. And to do this kind of research, we are also doing some kind of micro scale study by doing some kind of UAV survey to estimate the yield of oil palm by having more precise oil palm plantation data. We are also monitoring some of the diseases, especially the rhinoceros beetles. We are trying to look into if there is some kind of rhinoceros beetles related disease in this area. And then there is a stunted growth in this in the oil palm. So you can clearly see if there is a rhinoceros, because he can clearly see here, these are the oil palm, the crown projected area map of this oil palm. And because all these oil palm they had planted at the same time, but some of the trees they are not showing they have grown enough or they have enough value of ndvi, or there is so if we can monitor the whole area, then we can find some of the trees, the oil palm plants, they are having very stunted growth. And we, when we did some kind of ground survey, then we noticed like those are the trees or the oil palm trees that is infected by rhinoceros beetles. So if we are doing or using such kind of micro scale or the very high resolution data set that is coming from UAV, that can also give us information about diseases and pests that is present there, and we can use it for the controlling the disease and pest infection to improve the health of oil palm. That is also needed, because if the oil palm is healthy, then they can predict or they can produce much more oil palm, and we don't need to expand much more bigger area. So that is also one of the concept of the sustainability. Otherwise, if we don't, if our oil palm is not producing enough yield, then people might think, okay, let's try to expand the area of oil palm. So it is very important to monitor the oil palm yield in a synergistic way, so we can contribute towards the sustainability of oil palm production. And here is another study. We are focusing on the acacia plantation, because in acacia they have the rotational plantation activities. So we are using the 10x data as well as the UAV based information. We are extracting the various biophysical parameters to find how the acacia plant is growing in case of Savar region, and how we can provide that information for the sustainable harvesting of acacia plantation by doing some kind of selective logging, by providing information about the height and age or some other biophysical parameters using satellite data. And here, one of the interesting studies that we are conducting at Hokkaido or Japan. So in Japan, we have various, especially in the Hokkaido University, we have various experimental forest where we can fly our drones and we can collect data. So here we are looking into how we can use the UAV data to monitor the species, or especially focusing on multi-source geospatial data. So we are using the UAV RGB based images, we are using the LiDAR based images as well as the multispectral image. And because these drone based data can provide us leaf level information that is really needed to identify the species. So therefore we are conducting this kind of research, and we have acquired data within, not only in a single season, we acquired the data during the different season, like during the summer, autumn, winters, and rainy season. So if we have all these data, then multi-seasonality can play a major role to identify, because in case of Japan, they have the change in the leaf color that happens, like the from yellow to red and then green, that happens. So if we are using the seasonal data, then how it can help us to have better precise species information. So that we are working on by looking into the LiDAR data, the RGB data, multispectral data. And so then interestingly, if we integrate all these seasonal, multi-seasonal data, like that is coming from the spring, summer, autumn, winter, or the multi-seasonal data, that we have noticed, like if we are using multi-seasonal data, that can improve our accuracy of this tree species identification. If we use just single season data, that is not good enough, because we are not able to capture the differences between the species, because using either these indexes or using just classification. So therefore it is very important, because sometimes the change in the color is very fast, from green to red or green to yellow. So it is very interesting, especially in the autumn season as well as the early spring season, because some trees there is opening of leaf is very fast. In some trees, there's opening of leaf is very slow. So if we have these multi-seasonal data set, that can provide us much more better, precise tree species information. So that we have been working on, especially in the Uriu experimental forest. So that is one of the case study. And then last one is about the peatland subsidence monitoring using the interferometric SAR data. So in case of Bengalis,
5 minutes left.
yeah. So let's just I show you these slides. So because I think I don't have much time, so thank you very much all for your kind attention. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Yes, Tapas.
Oh, great, great. Thank you so much. Sharing the very enlightening result and thoughts here. you have covered a lot of potential of remote sensing from optical, radar, lidar, and now emerging. It's many people are using also UAV, and also showing us a great example from Cambodia, Philippines, Malaysia, even from Japan. And then the not only the forest carbon stock, but also covering this wild farm plantations, and then
Yes.
showing us temporal changes. So interesting. It's so interesting. And since we have a few minutes left, but there is one question that from Subhas Gautam, that he's asking, can we estimate deadwood biomass from above and below ground biomass in forest by using different modules? I think he wanted to say different modules means that there may be different types of remote sensing sensor, because we are talking about multi-sensor. Can you share your thoughts so that many people will have, I think, similar questions there?
Yeah, so as you know, dead wood means the very small branches of the tree. It's not the dead tree. So of course it's quite difficult because all these dead wood is covered by the canopies, and we cannot see through using these sensors. So that is unfortunately we cannot do that. But especially in my case, we conducted the field survey, and that time we have collected the litter as well as dead wood. So that is coming from the ground waste information. So, but the limitations of remote sensing or the satellite data is that we cannot see all these very minor objects that is under the some kind of crown or canopy. So even if we use lidar data, of course they can see the structure, but it's quite difficult. Something is at the ground is present that it's quite difficult to monitor. So I'm sorry, like we cannot do that. Of course we can, and that would biomass. Yeah, but we can use
Yes,
these equations, the allometric equations by IPCC, to estimate the. So that is the thing we can do. By if we have
yes.
the
Thank
above
you.
mass, then we can estimate what is the dead
Yes.
wood or litter amount.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much for that. And then there is one question, I think it is from Cambodia, and the name is not spelled out there. So the question, I will be reading the question. Is season were considered for Cambodia and Philippines forest in that example that you have shown?
Yeah, because that is not a species level study. That is the forest type. So of course, in case of forest types, we have the evergreen and deciduous. So if we consider the seasonality, then we can identify where is deciduous forest, where is the evergreen. So that can improve your results. But my target was to look into the overall what is the carbon stock in that area. So I consider as a whole. But I collected data in evergreen forest, deciduous forest, and mixed forest in Cambodia. So there should not be any kind of uncertainty in predicting the biomass of all these forest types in Cambodia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So those are all the questions, and then there are a lot of appreciation you can see in the chat box, and some participants are aligning their research to your research also. Maybe they may contact you later. And there is a one final, the last question, that how can we segregate forest type from pulsar data? That is
Yes,
the final last question.
yeah, I think Dr. Thapa is also expertise in pulsar data because he worked in Jackson. In fact, now he's also using. So of course, like if we have this pulsar data, then because there is backscattering information. So especially if we have forest types like the evergreen, deciduous, and mixed type of forest, then it's quite easy to monitor and to classify. That I also did in my one of the research paper. So that is doable, and there is already many published studies. So we can easily identify the forest types, but it's difficult to identify the species using the pulsar data.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ram, for giving very exciting lectures here. And then also, I'd like to thank Professor Song to deliver an excellent lecture in this session. So I would like to thank you all the participants who is actively participating, actively listening, and also typing the message in the chat box. Of course, there are some questions that we have discussed, but there are some questions maybe coming in the future. And then all these appreciation really help us, that inspire us, me, Ram, and Professor Song, to do more research, to set more examples, and then to share all those thoughts. So thank you so much, all participants there. And tomorrow we will have another exciting session, that's session 2, and that is on technology and application of carbon monitoring in the atmosphere. There will be 2 lectures in session 4 and then 2 lectures in session 3. And tomorrow we will be meeting again at 3 p.m. Beijing time. So with this, I would like to conclude this session and this training for today. Thank you so much. Thank you for all participating in this training session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that.